The vexed Thule cub snarled and lunged for Olivia Smith's throat, and she smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a terrified grimace masquerading as politeness. A genuine, warm, delighted smile. The kind a kindergarten teacher uses when a shy kid finally raises their hand to answer a question. The entire diplomatic chamber froze. Supreme Commander Korvax's claws went rigid. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. His massive frame, easily 8 feet of scaled muscle and weaponized predatory perfection, went absolutely still. Around the chamber, elite Vex Thule warriors, each one trained since cubhood to recognize and exploit weakness, moved their hands toward weapons with the synchronized precision of beings who'd spent centuries perfecting the art of killing. "Stand down." Korvax's voice cracked like fracturing ice. "Nobody move. That's an order." The cub, no more than 4 feet of emerging apex predator, had Olivia's arm pinned, teeth bared, every instinct screaming prey, vulnerable, attack. This was what Vex Thule cubs learned first, the scent of fear. The moment a target recognized their own mortality, the split second before violence became inevitable. But Olivia wasn't afraid. "Oh, hey, little one," she said softly, still smiling, her free hand rising slowly. Not in surrender, in greeting. "I know you're scared and confused, aren't you? Someone's been telling you you need to be mean to be strong." Rilia, the senior diplomat and cultural liaison, made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a prayer to the forgotten gods. This was impossible. Predators didn't negotiate with prey. Predators didn't smile at teeth-baring aggression. Predators didn't treat violence like a teaching moment. Everything the Vex Thule understood about survival, about power, about existence itself, demanded that this human woman should be bleeding out on the chamber floor by now. Instead, her fingers were extending toward the cub's head, gently, carefully, like she was approaching something precious rather than dangerous. "Get her to the medical bay," Korvax commanded. But there was a strange tremor in his voice. Uncertainty. In a commander whose certainty had never wavered in 47 cycles of military service. "Sir," Rilia ventured, "the cub is still attacking. If we move too quickly—" "I know what's happening," Korvax snapped, but he didn't order the warriors forward. His eyes, ancient, predatory, commanding, were locked on the human woman whose smile had somehow become the most dangerous thing in the room. The cub's growl softened. Its claws, which had been drawing blood from Olivia's arm mere seconds ago, relaxed their grip. The fur along its spine, raised in full combat posture, began to settle. "That's it," Olivia whispered. "You're not really angry. Someone just never taught you there was another way to be strong." Around the chamber, warriors exchanged glances. Hands hovered over weapons, uncertain whether to draw or retreat. The diplomatic shields had gone up automatically, classified. Threat protocols activating, locking every exit, preparing for the violence that always, always came when predator met prey. Except it wasn't coming. The cub tilted its head, ears lowering slightly. Still predatory, still dangerous. But something else was breaking through. Confusion, curiosity, and something the Vex Thule had no word for. Something that looked dangerously like trust. Korvax stepped forward slowly, his movement deliberate, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "What are you?" Olivia finally looked up from the cub, that inexplicable smile still in place. "An elementary school teacher," she said simply. "And I'm pretty good at handling scared kids." Every warrior in the room took a step back. The smile had done something to the cub's brain that Vex-Thul neuroscience had no framework to explain. Its predatory instinct, sharpened through millennia of evolution, refined through generations of warrior training, was colliding with something it had never encountered. Not dominance, not submission, not fear or rage or the clear hierarchy that governed every interaction of Vex-Thul understood. Kindness. The cub's teeth remained bared, but the lunge faltered. Its claws, which had been drawing blood from Olivia's arm, loosened their grip. For a moment, just a moment, the pure, predatory certainty wavered, replaced by confusion that flickered across its scaled face like firelight. Olivia extended her hand slowly, palm up. "She's offering." Korvax's voice trailed off, his mind struggling to categorize the gesture. "Surrender? No, that's not." The cub tilted its head, ears rotating toward Olivia. The gesture was unmistakably curious. "What is this?" Rylia whispered, her instrument suddenly alive with frantic beeping. "Commander, the neural activity in the juvenile is unprecedented. It's like something is overriding the predatory activation sequence. But I don't understand the mechanism." "Hey, little one," Olivia said softly, her voice dropping into the tone she used with her youngest students. Warm, steady, infinitely patient. "I know you're scared and confused, too. Someone's been telling you that you have to be mean to be strong, haven't they?" The cub froze. "That's not true," Olivia continued, completely ignoring the warriors whose hands now trembled on their weapons. "Being strong enough to be kind. That takes way more courage than being mean." The cub's ears lowered further. Its growl faded to almost nothing. Korvax raised his claw, taking a step toward the human. His voice came out rough, dangerous. "She violates every combat principle. Kill her. Now." Rylia grabbed his arm. Wait. Commander, analyze this first. The cub isn't attacking. It's responding to something. Something we—" "I don't care what it is," Korvax snapped. But he didn't move. His ancient eyes were locked on his offspring, watching it do something no Vex-Thul cub had ever done: lower its guard voluntarily. "You're not really angry, are you?" Olivia said to the cub, settling slowly into a sitting position on the chamber floor. A completely vulnerable posture. An indefensible position. Every predator instinct in the room screamed that she should die now. "Someone's been mean to you," Olivia continued. "Made you think that having power means you have to use it to hurt people. But that's a lie." "How can you possibly know?" Rylia started, but stopped as Olivia reached into her pocket. The chamber tensed. Weapons clicked into firing position. Warriors held their breath. Olivia produced a small wrapped pastry, standard diplomatic provisions, and held it out to the cub. "Kids are kids," she said simply. "Doesn't matter what species. Doesn't matter what you evolved for. You're still scared. You're still learning who you want to be." The cub approached her cautiously. Every muscle remained ready to strike. Every instinct remained primed for combat. And then it ate from her hand. Silence exploded across the chamber. "Permission to execute the human Supreme Commander?" Warrior One's voice wavered. "Sir?" Korvax stood motionless, watching his cub, his warrior cub, trained from birth in the sacred arts of dominance, nuzzle against Olivia's hand with something that looked disturbingly like affection. "Hold," Korvax said quietly. Something is happening I don't understand." Rylia's instrument screamed data into the chamber. Her readouts made no sense. The impossible was happening with the precision of mathematics. The cub leaned against Olivia, and for the first time in Vex Thule history, a predator chose comfort over conquest. Every protocol said this should end in violence. Every moment said everything they knew was wrong. The emergency summons had brought them in within minutes. Dr. Vex Thule, the lead xenopsychologist, her neural implants glowing with frantic activity. Commander Sinara, the combat specialist who'd personally trained 3 generations of warriors. Senior scientific advisor Kael'thas, whose entire career had been devoted to proving predatory behavior was genetically immutable. All of them stood utterly baffled. The neural scans show no fear response, Rylia explained, her instrument still streaming impossible data across holographic displays. No aggression trigger, no dominance assertion. It's like the juvenile's predatory centers are dormant, voluntarily suppressed. That's not possible, Kael'thas said flatly. Predatory drive isn't a switch you turn off. It's fundamental architecture. The cub was curled in Olivia's lap, actually purring, a sound that hadn't been recorded in Vex Thule acoustic databases for approximately 800 years. Korvax watched from across the chamber, his expression unreadable, his massive frame still as stone. Olivia looked up from petting the cub, her expression thoughtful. "Look," she said casually, as if discussing basic physics rather than the foundations of an entire civilization. "In my culture, we have something called childhood." Korvax stiffened. "Yes. Developmental stage before warrior maturity. Every species has—" "Right," Olivia interrupted gently. "But here's the thing. We try not to be horrible to kids while they're figuring out who they are." The chamber went very quiet. "Are you suggesting," Dr. Vex Thule said slowly, "that education can occur through means other than combat conditioning?" "I'm suggesting," Olivia said, still scratching the cub's head, "that your cub has been trained to fear and attack instead of think and feel. And it's exhausting. Look at how relaxed it is now that someone's actually treating it like it has value beyond its capacity for violence." Rylia's eyes widened. Her hand went to her mouth. "By the ancient gods," she whispered, "you're treating combat trauma like an emotional injury." The 4 paradigms collapsed simultaneously. First, the predator hierarchy paradigm shattered. Authority wasn't maintained through fear alone. It could be maintained through respect, through connection, through something that looked disturbingly like love. Second, the combat protocol paradigm failed. Violence wasn't an inevitable response to perceived threat. There were other responses, incomprehensible responses, but responses nonetheless. Third, the genetic certainty paradigm fractured. Predatory nature wasn't absolute determinism. It could be influenced, redirected, changed by something as simple as kindness. Fourth, the diplomatic protocol paradigm disintegrated. Trust didn't require strength display or dominance assertion. It could happen through vulnerability, through sitting down on a cold chamber floor and offering food to something that should have killed you. Around the chamber, emergency protocols began to fail. Weapon lockdown systems couldn't activate. The target wasn't hostile. Honor satisfaction protocols couldn't engage. There was no blood, no combat resolution, no ritual satisfaction. Predator dominance protocols crashed hard against the reality of a cub, choosing comfort over conquest. Korvax lowered his claws slowly. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I have spent my entire existence understanding one thing: power through dominance." What is this?" "It's called compassion," Olivia said simply. "We're pretty good at it. helped us survive when strength alone wouldn't. Turns out cooperation works better than conquest once you get the hang of it. Relia stepped forward, her voice trembling with the weight of revelation. Sir, if this woman can rewrite our cub's behavioral trajectory in moments, what else have we misunderstood about our own nature? Korvac stared at his offspring, relaxed, trusting, choosing safety over savagery. And something fundamental shifted in his ancient eyes. Everything, he said quietly. We may have misunderstood everything. Through the chamber's communication feeds, the message was already spreading through the entire Vex-Thul flagship. Junior warriors watched in real-time feeds. Senior commanders conferred in shocked emergency sessions. The impossible was being recorded, analyzed, and impossible conclusions were beginning to crystallize across every level of their civilization. The human, she unmade a warrior without weapons. One by one, alarms silenced. Weapon systems powered down, protocols uncertain. Warriors stood down, their authority fractured by what they were witnessing. Scientists recorded everything with the reverent intensity of beings watching history reshape itself. And in the center of it all, a predator cub purred in a human's lap, asking nothing more than to be treated like it mattered. Olivia hadn't used a single combat technique. She'd deployed no alien weaponry, no superior technology, no biological modification or cosmic engineering. She'd simply done what humans had been doing for millennia on a small, resource-limited planet. She'd understood another being's fear and addressed it with compassion. Humans evolved in tight social groups where cooperation meant survival, where individual strength meant nothing without group cohesion, where the ability to understand, diffuse, and connect wasn't weakness. It was the only advantage they'd ever had. Korvac stood with his hand on Olivia's shoulder, watching his cub sleep peacefully in her lap. His movements were careful, reverent, like approaching something sacred. For millennia, he said quietly, we treated your species like primitive weakness. Olivia looked up at him, still smiling. We are primitive at a lot of things. Cosmic engineering, advanced weapons, biological modification. We're babies compared to you. Terrible at all of it. But you're not primitive at... Relia paused, searching for language that didn't exist in Vex-Thul yet. At understanding each other. That's all we've ever had, Olivia said simply. A planet with limited resources. Hundreds of different kinds of people, different beliefs, different needs. We learned to talk to each other or we died. Simple as that. Korvac's claw tightened gently on her shoulder. So you learned to negotiate, to compromise, to... He struggled with the word. Care. Yeah, Olivia said. We're kind of obsessed with it, honestly. The original trade negotiation had stalled 3 cycles ago. The Vex-Thul demanded complete submission, favorable terms only if humanity accepted subordinate status in the galactic hierarchy. The human colony's representatives couldn't agree, not because they were weak, because they understood something the Vex-Thul had forgotten, that agreements made under duress don't last, that respect built on fear collapses, that true partnership requires genuine consent from both sides. The Vex-Thul had seen this refusal as defiance, as weakness masquerading as strength. Now, in the chamber where violence had nearly erupted, 2 species were negotiating terms that actually made sense. Partnership based on mutual benefit. Trade agreements where both sides gained something. Resource sharing that didn't require subjugation. It was revolutionary. Korvac reached up and removed his combat insignia, a ritual gesture that took 15 seconds, but carried the weight of his entire identity. He set it on the chamber table with deliberate care. "Rylia," he said formally. "I'm establishing a new department. Department of Emotional Cultural Studies. You will lead it." Rylia's eyes widened. "Sir, we need to understand what happened here," Korvax continued. "And we need to understand ourselves." Command was already contacting the human colony leadership and proposing long-term cultural exchange programs. Scientific teams were forming to study how human psychology created alternative power structures that didn't rely on fear. Educational programs were being redesigned. The word compassion was being added to military curricula for the first time in Vexthul history. Young warriors were being selected for compassion training with human advisors. The first joint task force was forming. Human diplomats working alongside Vexthul warriors, each species learning from the other's strengths. And the cub would stay with Olivia for a week of observation. Unprecedented, unthinkable, perfect. "What do we owe you for this gift?" Korvax asked, his voice heavy with the weight of civilization-altering gratitude. Olivia smiled, reaching up to gently pat his massive hand. "Nothing. But maybe don't assume strength means being mean." Korvax made a sound that might have been laughter, a revolutionary concept. "We know," Olivia said warmly. "Took us a long time, too. Still working on it, honestly." The cub stirred in her lap, pressing against her with the absolute trust of a young creature who just learned that the universe held more than fear. Korvax looked at his offspring, not seeing a future warrior, but an individual with needs, with potential for something more than conquest. War had been avoided, not through military might, through genuine understanding. A trade agreement had been reached that benefited both species. A cultural exchange was beginning that would reshape both civilizations. And an elementary school teacher from a small human colony had just rewritten what the entire galaxy understood about strength. Olivia didn't know it yet. She was too busy making sure the cub was comfortable, already thinking about her grading waiting back home. But history was watching. The transport shuttle hummed quietly as it approached the departure platform. Olivia gathered her minimal belongings, a teacher's life never accumulated much, and made her way toward the airlock where Korvax and the cub waited. "Well," she said, extending her hand in the human gestures she'd taught them over the past week. "I should probably get back to the colony. I have papers to grade." Rylia, who'd become something like a friend over the last few cycles, tilted her head in confusion. "Papers? You mean redundant written assessments of knowledge retention?" "Yeah," Olivia laughed. "The tedious kind that makes me want to scream into the void." Korvax's expression shifted into something approximating curiosity. "And yet you perform this task willingly, despite its apparent meaninglessness?" "Someone's got to teach kids to think," Olivia said with a shrug, "before you all try to recruit them as warriors." The Supreme Commander made that sound again, the one that might have been laughter. Behind him, the cub pressed against Olivia's leg, already mourning her departure despite knowing she'd contact them through the colony's communications network. Olivia crouched down and hugged the young predator, feeling its purr vibrate through her entire body. "You're going to be amazing," she whispered. "Remember, being strong enough to be kind is the hardest kind of strength." The cub nuzzled her cheek one final time. Back on Vexthul Prime, the transformation was already cascading through every level of their civilization. New diplomatic protocols were being implemented. Compassion consultants were now required at all high-level negotiations. Military training modules now included non-combat conflict resolution. Educational systems were being restructured to incorporate human-style emotional development. Young Vex Thule were being exposed to concepts their language didn't even have words for: mercy, understanding, forgiveness. The scientific community was in controlled chaos, studying human emotional intelligence with the fervor of beings discovering an entirely new branch of physics. Across the galaxy, the reports were spreading. The Galactic Council received briefings. Other species, those who'd built their civilizations on military dominance, began questioning assumptions they'd held for millennia. Military-first hierarchies started to wobble. Philosophical movements were beginning to coalesce around what some were already calling the Olivia Doctrine: strength through understanding, power through compassion. Humanity, previously viewed as low-level resource workers, suddenly found themselves relevant as cultural teachers. The cub would eventually become a bridge between species, a living symbol of what happened when predator met teacher and chose understanding over instinct. New generations of Vex Thule would grow up learning compassion alongside combat techniques, a balance their ancestors would have considered insanity. Vex Thule cultural liaisons were being assigned to all major galactic decisions. Olivia settled into her seat on the transport, accepting a cup of coffee from the steward with a grateful nod. She was already thinking about the mountain of papers waiting for her. 47 student essays on what makes a good leader that she'd been grading in her head all week. Her personal message alert chimed. Then again, and again. She opened it to find 47 new requests from various alien species, requesting the same thing: human cultural education programs. Olivia sighed deeply, setting her coffee down and rubbing her temples. Great. More meetings before I can grade those papers. The human next to her, a cargo specialist heading back to the colony, glanced over. How'd it go? With the diplomatic thing? Olivia took a long sip of coffee before answering. Oh, she said casually. Just prevented a war and fundamentally altered an alien species' understanding of their own nature. Tuesday. They both laughed as the ship lifted off, leaving behind a civilization in the early stages of reconsidering everything it thought it knew about power, about predators, about what it meant to be strong. An elementary school teacher from a resource colony had walked into a diplomatic crisis and walked out having rewritten galactic relations. She had no idea. She was too busy thinking about grading papers. But the galaxy was watching, and watching, and slowly, fundamentally, beginning to change. In classrooms across human space, teachers everywhere suddenly found themselves with a very different kind of value. In military academies across 100 species, young warriors were learning to smile instead of snarl. In council chambers and war rooms and high diplomatic halls, a revolutionary concept was taking root. Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply treat someone like they mattered. Sometimes strength meant being kind. And sometimes, on an ordinary Tuesday, a tired teacher saved the galaxy by remembering that kids were kids, no matter what species they evolved from.